Hey guys, and welcome to the Igloo, and today, as promised, I have the video for prime versus unprimed weapons. So let's get into it. So everybody knows on how to get the queen, but nobody has really actually managed to calculate the damage that you can actually perceive. So what you do is that you're able to, whenever you kill the queen or you go and get some trades done from Reddit or these discords, that you're able to get the prime plans for these weapons. Now, I've stated in other videos that prime ammo costs a lot more because it requires stable flux. Now, you can get stable flux by 1. Killing the queen, 2. Farming for itself by having high irradiated fluids and hardened mass, glowing mass from mobs inside a nuke zone. That means you have to initiate the farm. So that takes time in order for you to get the materials on top of everything else versus you getting actual regular materials that don't require 2 ultrasight and 1 or 2 stable flux, depending on what type of ammo you're trying to get. So because you're able to achieve a higher result sometimes with other weapons, it does vary. So we're going to start off with the difference between a 2-shot explosive handmade versus the 2-shot explosive 50 cal. I have the variants and prime plans for both, like I've said in my videos prior, and people don't understand what would be the best for each one. It's very, very variable when it comes to it. Now, I have not had the Scorched Receiver for either one of these variants, because the Scorched Receiver could possibly be able to do more damage to the queen, especially because you have the different receiver types. Now, one, if you have it for the 50 cal, and you only have the 1 receiver plan, big warning, you cannot unprime the 50 cal. It is very important that you do not prime the 50 cal unless you're fully well and capable of priming it and having the ammo for it and not crying about it afterwards when you have no ammo. So there's no going back currently right now unless you have both the prime and the Scorched Receiver plans. I personally do not have the Scorched Receiver plans for the 50 cal, nor do I know if they exist. So just as the small caveat, be very careful before you prime your 2-shot explosive 50 cal. When it comes to the handmade, the prime version actually will do less damage than the hardened receiver variant. So if you are going to be having that variant with that kind of combo, saying that it does extra bonus damage. Now again, I'm comparing automatic to automatic. The hardened one does more damage than the automatic, of course, but you gotta think of DPS versus automatic versus a single action. Now if you're able to fire it fast enough, or you have a macro if you're on PC, or you do something like that, you can actually achieve slightly higher DPS with a hardened receiver versus the automatic prime. This is to be calculated. We do not know the exact superior damage DPS when it comes to actual DPS onto the queen versus every other target. So it says superior damage, but I don't really think so. I think the hardened receivers are actually better in my mind, especially in the handmade category. Next, we're going to be going over for the assault rifle category. Now, this one's very interesting. The assault rifle, I've had to look at this for a few times. It can actually do more damage with the Scorched Receiver over the prime. And I was like, why is this a thing? Why have they not think about balance changes between a few different kind of receiver plans? Because there's no way to actually figure it out. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This should not be a thing. Why is the Scorched Receiver doing more damage than the prime, and the hardened one, the hardened receiver almost does as much or more when it requires less, and you don't need to kill the queen for it. Most people are not going to be priming their weapons or having Scorch Killer mods on their different types of weapons, because these are very niche specific based things. So getting on to that, going into further depth. Now, I have, the Gatling laser. So, the Gatling laser, the 2-shot variant that I have, I do not have the 2-shot explosive. I have the 2-shot Gatling with 90% weight reduction, which is, honestly, it's pretty good. especially with just using cheap fusion cores. Fusion cores are very cheap. You can just server hop to get them. You would not go and start a reactor because even after the nerf with that, it's not really reputable to just sit and camp for fusion cores. It's not, honestly. You can just server hop with Toga. There's 3 power chassis that always or at most times have fusion cores unless somebody took them from the world and then server hop themselves. So you're going to be going back and forth and doing that. So honestly, the Gatling laser is really cheap and it's really good ammo, but the Ultra Sight version, when you have to actually have a fusion core and then you Ultra Sight it, and then you have to make sure that everything's fine. I'm just like, dude, this is too much work for just an Ultra Sight core and the ammo type for it. No, it's not worth the extra 1 to 2 extra damage per shot. It's really not worth it. It does not scale properly. The Gatling lasers, especially when going on field tilt without the charging capacitor, barrel types, so that it fires at grandma speed, it's really not worth it, especially when you're trying to maximize your DPS. Now, I think that there is an Ultra Sight Gatling laser out there. Don't quote me on it, but I think that there is because somebody actually has Ultra Sight Prime Gatling laser plans. Now, again, if that is actually a thing, maybe it does more DPS damage with the Ultra Sight version. But if it's anything like any of the Gatling laser weapons, the laser rifle weapons, the laser pistol weapons, they break so easily, it's not even funny. It really isn't. Yes, the ammo is cheap, but it just breaks too quickly, and honestly, that's why everybody goes for the 50 cal, the handmade, and also other variant types. Even with the actual 5-star weaponsmith repair card on, so that you don't have to deal with that damage, it still breaks very quickly. I only probably go through 2, maybe 2.5 fusion cores when shooting the queen before it breaks, even with that card on. So I'm just like, no, that is not worth it at all. Now, for a couple other cases like the one that I showed in my video, the Prime 2-shot explosive Gatling that I still do have, it's really honestly good. Even if you prime it itself, again, you're risking 100 more shots per second. And instead of actually having a lot of fire rate, because you're going from a fire rate of 400 to 500 fire rate, and it's a noticeable difference when you're killing the queen. So again, it comes down to DPS on how many times you want to shoot a target. Personally, I think the unprimed with the speedy receiver 2-shot explosive Gatling has better DPS. And I would personally like to use that more often than other variants. The 50 cal can get up there. When I can get mid-max, I can probably do anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 shots with the 50 cal 2-shot explosive with Demo Expert 5 on. It's really powerful with every card that I have. And when I put all my damage cards down, it's really powerful. Now, I'm not doing a melee build with that on top of it. I do have a lot of bloodied, different types of weapons and furious weapons like that. But I just don't have the build for it exactly so I can be able to do maximum damage no matter what. Now, also, on top of it, you have other factors that come into these receivers. So, if you are dealing with the Scorch Killer, or the Scorch Beast Killer, or whatever you want to call it, you're doing 50% more damage. So 50% of what's your actual damage that you have, and then you slap that on top of it. It's a very cheap knockoff, but again, if you don't have the hardened receiver plans for your specific weapon, and you weren't able to break down your weapon properly, I highly, highly, highly recommend for you to do the Scorch Killer when killing the queen. Again, this is in all respective to queen killing. Okay, this is not for your normal case situation stuff. Like I've said multiple times, my last videos, I'm mainly queen focus based when it comes to like actually having these weapons and types, because all the other mobs, like if you have a 2-shot explosive anything, pretty much everything dies within 1 to 3 shots. No matter what kind of like combination you put on, as long as you have like the raw damage cards, like they're only going to do 1 to 2 shots for damage, and I mean you pretty much like kill everything, which again I don't really agree with, but I mean that's the god tier end game stuff. So when you're going to kill the queen with like a pipe pistol, pipe rifle, I have a level 30. It's I think 2-shot explosive. It's still not worth it at the end to prime most of your weapons. I have my weapons prime. I have some weapons primed, and I have some weapons that are not. It doesn't really show a big difference, especially if you have a couple melee builds that are min-maxed as well that are in this category. It's just not enough for me to actually recommend prime anything when it comes to these type of variants. Even though, yes, they are nice, you actually have a lot of advantages and disadvantages when it comes to it, especially the Scorch Killer receivers. Those are more important than anything else. So again, that's the quick recap. If you guys like this kind of content, please leave a like, leave a comment down below, and you guys just been killing it. Thank you so much over these holidays. This is probably one of the best Christmas presents, actually, seeing you guys like this kind of stuff and going through what people actually would like to see. So have a good one, guys. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
I shot it to get his attention.